Hi, everyone. Welcome back to uh, Democracy 3.0. Um, we are a collaborative organization that innovates open democratic processes. Our goal is to create a consensus, a collaborative consensus that is inclusive, and the ultimate goal is to grow um, the numbers of our group with this who agree on this consensus to the degree that we have some power in the real world as a block of voters. So I was thinking this week that maybe we could talk about the process of coming to the consensus, in an inclusive way, including, potentially people who will be coming to the meeting and maybe they're on the left or on the right. Maybe there will be some disagreement about different things in the group, but what is the process that um, that we can use to bring everyone together, to find the points, the ideas, the statements that everyone can agree on and get behind. So yeah, and then maybe we can talk about that for 30 minutes, and then after, in the second half, then we can sort of give it a try. So just 4 people today, so we can speak as you're moved to speak.
Well, Eddie, I like that you think this out and that you have a plan. Of course, when you talk about reaching consensus, that's what deliberative the dialogue is all about, is not reaching consensus, but coming to a place where you could,
Yeah.
in other words, start out with just ending the battle.
Yeah.
You're not my enemy. You're my
Yeah.
fellow person in the world.
Yeah.
And we just disagree. So what is it that we do agree on?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what and like I say, I had the meeting last night before he showed up, and we did talk, and it was and nothing was decided. But I think everybody was clearer about what they came to the meeting with, and what they left with was they were clearer about their ideas. So
I've started reading a little bit about consensus building processes, and there's some books, there's a lot of history on that, and a lot of times sort of as an alternative to voting, where you have on the one hand voting where you just go with some version of a majority rule, or some version of what does everybody want the most, versus consensus processes. And then I think that in our group we're also trying to add something on to the end of it, which is that if we're doing a document, maybe it's not only simply like option, very defined, option A, option B, or option C. I think that we should go for sort of writing a document, something that everybody can get behind. So how do you do that in a group process? I don't know. Maybe you guys have ideas about how to do this. I'm sure there's lots of work that I don't know about yet.
Was the questions how to build consensus around a document?
Yeah. So like, if we're sort of defining a function, and the function is that you start with, say, 100 people, 7 people or 100 people who have, some of them have completely different worldviews, opinions, values, um, and fact, like they're focused on a different set of facts. And then on the right hand side, on the output, you want to get a statement that or an article, maybe a short article, an article that all of these 7 people or all of these 100 people can say, yeah, I agree with this. I had a I have I agree with this. I basically agree with this. What's the process?
So I guess, I don't know, starting with agreeing upon a goal. What is it that you want to accomplish?
Yeah.
That narrows it down.
Right. So I think our goal is, well, the consensus itself is the goal. Like, you have all this polarization in the US, you have people splitting and agreeing on less and less. And we want to build a consensus that brings everybody back together, that everybody can agree on. Maybe that includes some ideas about reality. I think that's the goal. I guess the goal is, where should the country be going? What should government be doing? What should we, America, collectively be doing together?
Blueprint on America.
So this question of, or it's like, so you say everybody, you mean you're trying to get like politically active Americans? Like, who are we talking about? Just this group of 100 people? Are like, is our threshold 100%, or is our threshold 90%, or is our threshold, like, I think there's some like important kind of fundamental things here, because like you're getting kind of meta and a lot, and I think some of the words you're using are ill-defined. And so I want to understand, you're saying the goal is to find consensus for everyone to find consensus, but I think there's some specifics that you addressed within that statement.
Yeah, so yes, that is potentially difficult to define. I mean, that is potentially like a scientific question and not a design question. So say what I mean is that, say that there's a question of how far you can go. And like, with consensus processes, they acknowledge this, that, it's sort of, when they do consensus processes, they find that it's a different concept, that when the entire group is, say we simplify it and say the entire group is coming to a decision, there is a concept of, I can accept this decision well enough, I can live with it. It may not be my number one choice, but I'm basically okay with it. And so a lot of consensus processes, they're sort of defined. I guess the definition in a standard consensus process would be that nobody blocks it, and blocking it is an option for anyone in the entire group. So it requires some degree of, everybody has to be somewhat committed to moving forward, and people have to balance for themselves. They may have, so they may have some concerns, and part of the process is they bring up the concerns and people talk about them. But at the very end of it, it still may not be like their ideal, like, I love, say we're going to 3 movies, we're say the 4 of us are going to a movie, and there's 3 movies we can see. And there may be a movie that, I would rather watch I don't know, Batman. But, I'm okay with going to, some other movie and everybody else wants to go to it. And I'm happy to go forward. Whereas blocking would be like, no way in hell am I going to that movie. No matter what you say. And if you guys go, then I'm out. I'm going home.
So again, this word everybody, right? Like it you kind of you're getting a little bit circular with it. Like you seem to be kind of bouncing between like we're talking about this group, but we're also talking about America at large.
Yeah.
And again, it's like and then you talk about polarization
Yeah.
and it's still kind of amorphous, and I'm not totally grasping what you're asking or what you want.
Well, I may be asking the same question that you're asking. That is the question. What do we want? It's that is the question,
Okay.
right?
So I would say that like I think this isn't we're not the first people to think about this or talk about this, but
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's like, what are the overall goals? I mean, to form a more perfect union, right? Like, right, it's it's to improve the well-being of people on the planet. Right. And that's kind of where everything kind of goes for every nonprofit. Like that is the ultimate mission. And they're just taking a slice of that. And so it's like, what slice of this overall mission of improving the well-being of people on the planet do we want to take?
Yeah.
And so my impression so far has been the goal is to increase and is to improve the quantity and quality of engagement in I don't want to limit it to politics necessarily, because can be applied to more than that, right? This can be like community engagement and stuff, but improve the quantity and quality of engagement in collective societal functions.
Yeah. Sort of,
Maybe.
definitely it's relevant to sort of self-organization, maybe like sort of decentralized organizations, things like this. I think it is a current topic. I guess the question is sort of, can there be some sort of bottom-up governance process? Can there be something that replaces representative government? And can it, how do you leverage and better use, the communication that's available in the modern era?
I'd like to address some of that. A lot of what you're saying, Eddie, is what I want, which is to see people less at odds, more together. You're calling it consensus. I'm calling it a bond. It's kind of an agreement to be together, whether we agree or not. And there's some things I can agree with, some things I can go along with, even though I don't agree with them. And when you said two things, you said, can we get away from representative government, which is corruptible? And can we move to a more bottom up? And of course, if you get on a more local level, it's probably easier to get involvement, because you're probably talking about the stuff that's going on in people's lives on a daily basis. And there's probably more interest in that than, say, the war or whatever. I mean, it's like, I want to eat today. I want to know that my neighbors are healthy and well. I want to better my prospects and myself. So
Yeah, I mean, I really want to work on something that is scalable somehow, which can work for small groups and for large groups. Um, Part of that might be, a pyramid structure, sort of like sortition.
So you talked about getting away from representative democracy or representative. Well, so like not everybody wants to participate in solving day-to-day problems, right? People just want government to function. And so I wonder if sort of a better model is like a Wikipedia model, where many people just want to go onto Wikipedia and read information and learn. And some people do want to dig into the nuts and bolts of making sure articles are accurate and making sure that the whole structure is done in a open and sort of democratic process.
Yeah,
of thing.
definitely. Yeah, there's definitely probably some aspect to that. And I think, with democracy, those two things can be confounded a little bit because, it may be that people don't want to participate, or it may be that people think that their participation would not count, would not make a difference. So like maybe, America voting numbers are very low. Maybe a lot of people feel that, it doesn't make a difference when they vote, and so they're not. And, of course, I think that um, people should vote. We should get people voting. And part of that is the more the process makes it very clear that the votes count, then the more interested people will be in voting or participating. Maybe it's not voting. Maybe it's, participation of some sort.
So I'd love to chime in.
Yeah.
So maybe an addendum could be added. This is why I said improving the quality and quantity of engagement in collective societal function, right? Is
Yeah.
like it recognizes and acknowledges that we're not going to get to 100%. That's not the goal,
Right.
right? But it does recognize that where we're at right now is not enough.
Yeah.
We need more.
Yeah.
It leaves room for everything from this kind of lower level local community engagement all the way up to federal, national, maybe even global international affairs.
Yeah.
But you could maybe add an addendum onto what I just stated and say, through ground up decentralized improved democratic, or through ground up decentralized democratic mechanics,
Yeah.
or something. And access to information or education or whatever. Like I feel like you could like just list a bunch of things, but I think that fundamental thing of like improving the quantity and quality of citizen engagement or resident engagement or the engagement of Americans
Yeah.
in collective societal function.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also an important that we're talking of, we're getting we're going to be, using modern tech, and it's like, maybe we should specify that we're talking about people that we want engaged, not just like corporations or whatever. So that might be a good clarification to add in that statement. But I think that might be a good kind of broader goal. And then it's like from there, we can drill down and get into some of the more specific ways in which we would do that, or philosophies behind how we approach that problem, and things that we're trying to do to actually make that happen. But I think I think that is a sort of a reasonable overall vision. So I don't know, what do y'all think of that statement as a vision statement or mission statement?
Could you repeat it?
Yes. Improving the quantity and quality of citizen, we might replace that word, engagement in collective societal function.
Okay.
Yeah, I
good.
definitely agree with that. And to keep it sort of concrete, like sort of close to the ground, I think that what it might look like again, is sort of like we have Brian's legislative package, the American Union legislative package, right? And that's sort of ready to go. Like if we could put that into, put that in place, in the government, that's ready to go. But I think that there's sort of like a broader thing where, not everyone is necessarily interested in crafting legislation, but I think everyone is, interested in having a say. So maybe is like, a non-legislative, like written in ordinary language that everyone can understand. There's like a set of documents. Maybe there's like longer ones and shorter ones. And maybe the shortest version would be like, Brian's 3 bullet points, like, end poverty, and mass incarceration, and wars. That would be your shortest thing. But you can say that, and most people would agree with that. But then, the more detailed you get, then the more room there is for disagreement. So maybe everybody agrees to some degree with end poverty, but then maybe a third of people are, if you say, well, let's use UBI to end poverty, then a third of people would say, no, that wouldn't work. People would stop working, you'd get lots of inflation, et cetera, right? Then you have that conversation. So you have this, there's this sort of potentially set of documents, but I think that those documents, if you can get them to the place, if you can get the people and the documents to the place where everybody is sort of on board with some theoretical document that you write at some level of detail, to me that's the goal. Yeah.
Okay, I think that before we run out of time, I want to talk about, I think we're hinting at liquid democracy, where there's things that I really get into and I care about. And then there's some stuff, I trust Brian, but I really don't give a shit. But I trust Brian. And so I will give a proxy to Brian on that one issue. So that way, you can be involved in whatever level you want, just to know the people that you trust that are involved. And once you have that in line, anyway, that's just, I think other people know more about this than I do.
Yeah, that's a good point, TC. Yeah, let's give it a try. Let's just give it a try. And I think the 4 of us are relatively agree on lots of stuff. So maybe we can try to find something where we have some degree of disagreement and see how we can deal with that. So I guess I'll share screen and get a document going. So maybe we'll have to get more into details today to find something that we're not already completely on the same page with. Okay. So we have end poverty, end hunger, and homelessness, freedom and opportunities to learn. Let's maybe zero in on one of these points. Do you guys have a preference? Any on which particular one you want to talk about today? Work on today?
Increased transparency is interesting because I think this can be an argument of moderation, right? Like people should have a right to privacy, but also like maybe the larger the institution, the larger the entity, the more transparency needs to be required. I say something similar with doling out money, right? The larger the entity, the more conditional the money should be. So when we're talking about individual people, it should be unconditional. When we're talking about like foreign aid, it should be more conditional, right? And everything in between, right? Counties, state governments, companies, whatever. So you could maybe make a similar argument with transparency of like, where is that line drawn? How do we moderate that? How much do we require and at what levels and where and for who? I think is certainly could be a point of debate for a lot of people.
I feel like I want to try something and try to get to sort of core values. So when we say increased transparency, what is the fundamental, why do we want to increase transparency? Can we bring it back to a fundamental human value, like this is just clearly good, everybody just agrees that this is good, or to some degree, even if people maybe have a different level of focus on that value, but there's like a core set of human values that everybody shares to some degrees, things like honesty,
I was gonna say truth, honesty, truth.
absolutely. Yeah.
I would say transparency goes hand in hand with accountability, and they both rely on each other. Can't like you can't have one without the other. Accountability is important because it ensures that, especially when we're talking about collective resources, when we're talking about, right, which is what society is, it's what government is we all contribute a little bit and then receive a lot in return because it's more efficient as a collective. Accountability is what helps to ensure that is actually happening, that we're getting a fair return on what we're putting in. And so transparency is crucial, because without that transparency, that accountability cannot happen. So there's a sort of a selfish reasoning for on the individual level to have transparency, to have institutional transparency, which is like, I think there are other arguments you can make, like TC was saying, like, honesty, integrity, truth, whatever. Like a lot of people have these core fundamental values, but I think making the narcissistic argument is kind of forcibly connects it with more people than maybe, some people don't care as much about honesty. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, what did you what did you just pull up here?
This is Theory of Basic Human Values. I don't think these are the ones I'm looking for. There was some book I read at some point that had a list of human values, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty, those are pretty good. And I don't think this is the list.
No, but that'd be a cool way to live.
Yeah.
All right, well, while you're looking for those, I guess I just want to maybe push back just a little bit on the idea that transparency and accountability have to go hand in hand. And I guess I'd use the example of like my phone, where I can hold the phone accountable for whether or not it works and whether or not my calls get through or my things like that. Even if I have no idea how it does it, I know whether or not it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so you can still have government that does things in inscrutable ways, but as long as you can observe the results, if it is making society function well, then you can still have accountability without transparency. So I'm not saying that it's bad to link those two together. I'm just saying that they don't have to be linked together necessarily.
Are you saying you don't need to be a weatherman to know which way the wind's blowing?
Sure.
Or you don't need to know how the IC works to drive your car.
Yeah. Well, I know that we lack transparency and accountability in the current version of government. And is to the to the transparency, it goes back to how many people really care. And then it's like, of the people who care, how deep do they want to go into it? But I'm flashing. It was like I was in the doctor's office and I was telling the doctor, did you know that Medicare pays 106% of the going rate on medication? And it's like, I've got all these, it got all this information about what's actually going on. And it's like, gee whiz. I mean, it's like, there's so many things we could do to just real simple things that could make a big difference. And it's all about, I think the lobbyists are writing the legislation, and I would rather Brian write it myself.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look for that list. I don't think I can find it right now, but I think this list is a little bit closer to the one that I'd seen before. So creative values, working, creating things, experiential values, beauty, love, attitudinal. I think that's a little more complicated. Relationship values, achievement values, recreation values, health values. There was this very awesome list. I hate that I'll have to look for it. It'll be for next meeting. But okay. I guess let's get back to the document. So is truth and accountability, are these the I mean, I think that sums it up, right? Those are the values in transparency. And then, you know, Brian, I think Brian had a good point.
I guess I'm thinking about it a little more, and I'm thinking of maybe like the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah.
There's no cameras in the courtroom. Their deliberations are all secret,
Yeah,
but we know what the result is at the end of the day. So we have a metric to hold them accountable for whether or not they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, even if we don't know how they got to that conclusion. Exactly.
And we don't have a method for holding them accountable.
There is that too.
Demian for life, bro. They
Well,
said- they-
Clarence Thomas still in the hospital?
What? Oh, Clarence Thomas is in the hospital?
He was for at least as of yesterday morning. He'd been there for like 5 days. Anyways.
Oh,
on this accountability, I think you've made some good points that about you know, being able to have accountability without full transparency. I would push back a little bit and say that institutions that are that there's an inherent limit on how accountable, because you may see what are positive results, but you don't realize, but with additional transparency, you could see that they're not nearly as good as they could or should be. And that may be difficult to tell without the transparency. So I would say, I think you make a good point that they're not 100% necessary, but maybe that transparency improves the opportunity to for more accountability, but it's not an end all be all. I think I would agree with you on that point.
So I think you make a good point too. And now I'm thinking of like Bernie Madoff. And so, you know, it's like very clear. Yeah, you get 8% returns or whatever on your money. And so everyone held him accountable to that standard. But once the transparency was there, you realized it was all a scam. So yeah, anyways, you make a good point too, Sass.
Yeah.
Good example. I mean, it does seem to be something where there is some like upper limit to it, like at least in terms of like practically speaking, like you could have everything available transparently, and like Brian talks about a little bit, like to some degree, a lot of people would just not be interested in looking at it, or if they looked at it, they might not understand it. Or you could even get like sort of conspiracy theories sometimes where like you have something transparent and then maybe some people are like sort of misinterpreting what's there, and constructing, potentially constructing false narratives around certain parts of that. um yeah.
I'm going to talk about the narrative of, I don't need to know how it works, but I do kind of need to know how it's regulated, how it's given to me, who's in charge, what's going on between the power plant and my house, because there's people that control all of that infrastructure. And so I think who's in charge and what they're doing, I think I need to know that, even though I don't need to know how electricity works.
Maybe we should focus in on a particular domain. We're trying to build this organization that will eventually be large enough to have some power as a group of voters. How transparent should our organization be in the future? Is there? Yeah, I mean, how would that work?
I would actually say there's an opportunity cost. Sometimes trying to be as absolutely transparent as possible can require a lot of effort and with very little return. And so I think that is a valid question of like, maybe there is just a point where you just cut it off and you say, like, it's not worth documenting this because it's just like, this just is just so much more effort and it's not giving us anything in return. But of course, where do you draw that line? But yeah, that's a really good question. It's a difficult, there's no like metric, like standard like SI unit for transparency for an organization. So it's kind of hard to answer that question directly. But talking about like, I do think that streaming meetings on YouTube, even just for like the 1 hour period of time and then allowing it to continue afterwards, that makes sense because it's a free platform that's accessible, that allows you to store that video content, rather than I've had before in organizations where it's like we try to store it on a Google Drive, you have to like request access, it's this whole thing. But this is like simple and straightforward. So maybe that should be the goal, that like methods of transparency should be intentionally chosen to be like simple and low effort, or just like not low in labor cost. And that if we find ourselves trying to add in a layer of transparency that requires a lot of additional effort, that perhaps that isn't necessary, or we should rethink it.
Public. Essentially, we have public meetings.
Well, I don't know about you, but I get the recordings and I put them on YouTube. I mean, it's like, when you said, should we be transparent? The first thing went through my mind is, well, what do we have to hide? I mean, it's like, maybe there is something to hide. I don't know. I'm a kind of like you get what you see. It's, it reminds me sometimes an idiot is a genius in disguise. Sometimes it's just an idiot. So
it may be a tangent, but I mean, another sort of maybe value that goes in the opposite direction. I think Sass mentioned it also in passing, is privacy. That on the other hand, as an individual, you have, I think you have a right to privacy, and even potentially, like, say, I have a right to have a private conversation with Sass. Like, if there was something I wanted to talk about with Sass that I just, I don't want, it's not something I want to talk with everyone. I just want to talk with Sass about this particular thing. I think that's also, that I think that's right, that people have and should have. So yeah, that's also sort of a where do you draw the line question.
well, I think each individual would probably have a line at which they prefer not to talk about themselves any further. I mean, I'm not afraid to be found out, but there's a lot of things I'd rather not be public. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
I've lived a sheltered life. Sheltered in sex and drugs and rock and roll. And so I've done some things that I'm not real proud of, but I don't care if people know about it. But that's me. Some people would, that people that are in business and stuff and have a reputation to sell, they would have a way different attitude about it than I do.
For people whose families, may harm them if they find out something about their identity or something that they've done that isn't actually harmful. But yeah, there are very legitimate reasons for individual privacy. Welcome, Nissan. Nissan,
Hey,
how
what's
would
up?
you like us to pronounce that?
So I can't think of much more sort of relevant to our organization now or in the near future. We have the public meetings, we hang out afterwards. Maybe we should move on to another topic. What do you guys think?
Nissan asked, what is this meeting about? And
Yeah. So Nissan, we're a collaborative organization that is working on a democratic, collaborative democratic processes that are inclusive, that we can bring a large group of people together and have everyone more or less agree or accept, one consensus. And the goal is to grow this group eventually to where it's large enough to have power as a block of voters, and tell the government, this is what the people want. This is what you should do, or what
So it's a coalition builder? Basically a coalition builder.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think we build, like, we're trying to bring individuals together more than groups, but groups are welcome also. Yeah.
Well, like Eddie and I are kind of like a collaborative. Eddie's doing Democracy 3.0. I'm doing deliberative democracy, and Brian's got a blueprint on America. We all, in SAS is voting. We all have our love, and then we share with each other just for support and moving forward, and how we can make this a better for everyone.
Cool. Can I share my liquid democracy? Is everybody familiar with that?
Yeah.
No, you were
Yeah,
asking
talk
about
about
it.
that. Yeah. Yeah, please do.
Okay, so liquid democracy is a hybrid between populist democracy, or just, well, everybody gets a vote all the time, or also known as direct democracy, and representative democracy, which is kind of sort of what we're supposed to have right now, although our representatives don't technically represent us. So what it seeks to do is that it gives power, it gives power to represent by having people adjudicate their vote to a person or an organization, and that vote can be retracted any time in favor for a direct policy. So let's say on day-to-day operations, Bob, he got his shit together, right? He gets the work done. I just defer to Bob on this subject. But now we have a meeting on like what we're gonna have on lunch on Tuesday, and Bob has some pretty stringent dietary whack ideas. So I could retract my vote from Bob that would normally defer to Bob. And like, nah, I'm taking my vote back and I'm voting by myself on that particular meal for that day. Alternatively, I could just defer to somebody else. Like I'm still not going to be there, so instead, Mike probably have the same taste that I have. So Mike would probably, I could trust Mike to vote on the same behalf on what I would like. That's basically the meat and potatoes of that. It's basically has a built-in, basically there's a built-in accountability mechanism where we don't have to like vote to get the guy out. You just take the power away from the person to vote right there and then. So
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page with you there, Nissan. I think we're a fan of liquid democracy.
I think that it's the cosmic mother that brought you here, because we were talking about liquid democracy, and you explained it kind of like I was trying to explain it, but you made it real clear. So we're all in agreement. I like the idea myself, because there's things that I care about and there's things that I would delegate to somebody who is interested where I'm not. So I agree with you. That's good.
yeah, because I think right now I feel a lot of people are so skeptical because they've been so burned by leadership that they feel like any type of leadership is bad, like all power is bad. And then you get into some anarchistic ideas, which on certain grounds could work and might work well, but in others completely and totally fail. Like I like to say, like you can't have an anarcho structure on a sailboat. You can't. You all die. That's what I mean. That's why when sailors have an honorary position called the captain. The captain is not somebody that's just elected or something. Now the captain's a dude that has the most experience on the ship. That's it. Whoever's the most experience on the ship, he captain now. He captain now. Why? Because people gonna live. You're gonna get the boat to where it needs to go. That's his only job. Get the boat to where it needs to go.
So Nissan, how do you see liquid democracy working in a country where we elected a reality TV star as president, right? Would you see people just giving their votes to whoever was popular, the biggest influencers and things like that? Would that be the outcome of liquid democracy?
Well, what I see now is any part of this is because of the way we've been conditioned through and mentally manipulated through various mechanisms. I think that's going to be a problem in any system. That needs to be tackled first, because no system you put in place, I mean, that is going to correct that problem. Just like what they said with democracy. Democracy functions, people participate.
But that was the point of the Electoral College, was to correct that problem, so that if the masses, voted for some crazy person, then the House of Representatives would step in and be like, no, we're going to pick somebody sane. I mean, that was the
And obviously
original
that's
theory.
proven false. That was obviously proven false. So
Um,
I don't think there's no argument there no more.
I'm not sure it's proven false, but Sass said
So-
something.
No, they elected Donald Trump with the electoral Congress. So yeah, I think that's false.
Okay. So I want to jump in. So yeah, Nathan, we've talked about liquid democracy a lot. I'm a board director for the Equal Vote Coalition. Democratic mechanics
I
are my
remember you.
thing. Yeah. And so proxy voting is absolutely a thing we want to build into what we're doing for sure. A lot in the way that you described, that you can rescind your vote at any time, and that you can delegate based on different topics or different issues. The issue you're talking about with like this mob mentality problem and this influencer problem is like fundamental to collective groups of people, because human beings were just not designed to interact in the way that we interact now in the information age, which is why we also talk about sortition or citizens assemblies, where you collect a group of random people and you put them in a room together, and you use communicative, or you put them in small groups of like 6 or 7 people to talk about a specific issue, and you kind of alternate between that and a larger group, and you use professional communication, and that this helps to break down a lot of those barriers and a lot of those misinformation and the disinformation and the problems, and it allows you to build consensus in a way. And so long as your overall group is big enough, then your sample, you've got a good sample size, and you can kind of cut through some of those problems, because the kind of small group discussion is something that humans are really good at. And so I've previously talked about using both of those systems to balance each other, because one of the problems with sortition, with citizens assemblies, is you can get them to come to almost any conclusion based on the information that you give them from the start, based on what experts you bring in.
That's exactly what
Yeah. And so you can kind of I've thought about how you can hybridize these systems. Ideally, my personal brainchild, and there are a lot of different ways you do this, just my interpretation, is you have citizens assemblies that write legislation that are then voted on nationally using liquid democracy. And so there's a kind of a check and balance there. And if you have a lot of transparency in how that citizen assembly came to that conclusion, you could start, that could over time gradually, it's workable is what I would say. It's workable, and there's a lot of kinks that need to be worked out.
I mean, I see that, but I think we still have some fundamental, problems that are not being addressed, because it goes beyond just a structural problem. We're moving into a place where, like you said, it's fallacies of the human condition in this day and age, and we're dealing with, one, people not being engaged in the system. A lot of people are not educated enough to actually participate in the system. And then, particularly in this country, we have a mental health crisis going on right now. So getting people, you have extreme fantasies on both ends that just have now became more powerful just because they're the loudest voice in the room. So we have that problem. But we have, and then, we have the echo chamber, that we have these issues that reinforce certain ideas and radicalize people. And then people just are marginalized until they're just fighting each other for power, not because of what's correct, but just because, a group identity.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we have a tribal nature.
Yeah.
So this is, we could talk about structure and what's the best structure, all that all day, but until we actually deal with those, understanding those fundamental problems, no matter what structure you put in, it's not going to hold, because it's only as good as the people. Like I would say, the computer's most, the biggest security flaw in a computer is the user.
Yeah.
I'm a
So-
technician.
So
So-
it's both and, right? You need both the correct structure and you need to address this knowledge problem, this engagement problem. Right, 'cause they feed into each other. And it's a feedback loop. So I just reposted today what I was suggesting is a potential mission or vision statement for the group, which is improving the quantity, quality, and power of individual engagement and collective societal function.
Sure.
And so, right, this is another thing I've talked about where, like I said, people are going to be addicted to something. So let's get them addicted to making the world a better place. And let's not be afraid to use some of the same technology and tactics that social media and mobile games and all these other things are using to hack into people's brains. We can use that in an open, transparent, in an open source and transparent way to get people to engage with issues and to learn about issues in much more constructive ways than we currently do through like a donor-funded social media platform that isn't just trying to maximize profit, it's actually trying to improve society.
Fantastic. I came up with the same idea.
So yeah, so this is the kind of stuff that we are exploring. We've absolutely talked about and thought about these issues, and we're glad to have you here. We always need more contributors.
So we're actually coming up on the hour, so I'm going to end the official meeting, but I do want to call for volunteers and say that I'm going to start working on some more detailed language, maybe like a short paragraph or a short article about ending poverty. And I wanted to see if you guys want to write some stuff about any of these other topics, and then maybe at the next week we could bring, maybe we could write individually and then bring it to the group and go over that writing. Any takers?
Well, first, can I make a suggestion to add something to that list?
Okay. Go ahead.
How to combat corporate infiltration and what's it called? Goddamn. And regulation of capture.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
So
So
Eddie, before you close the meeting, I want to say that this is,
I'm sorry, regulatory capture. I'm sorry, that's regulatory, my bad.
I wanted to say that this meeting has renewed my hope in the movement going forward, because we're all in agreement, and yet we all have our own paths and our own ways, and yet we're on the way. And it just makes me feel good to see that, like Nissan, you show up, I've never seen you in my life, and we agree, and I feel like you're my brother, and this makes me feel good about going forward. So I want to thank all of you for being here and making my life better.
okay, and on that note, thanks everybody who's watching on YouTube. Hope you enjoyed the meeting of Democracy 3.0, and we'll see everybody next week.